Well, hello, everybody, and welcome back. Welcome to episode 56 of the Unstoppable Entertainment Show, the most comprehensive entertainment news show on the internet. I am, of course, Nate Schaffner, otherwise known as the Unstoppable Nate. I hope you guys enjoyed the last episode. This will be my second episode today. Um, I do want to quickly apologize the way I ended the previous episode. Something came up rather quickly, and I had to take care of it in a rush. Um, so I do apologize if it seemed like I ended the previous episode uh, abruptly. Anyway, I hope you guys enjoyed the last episode. Um, and I hope you guys enjoy today this episode. I've got a lot to talk about that I want. I've got a lot that I want to talk about on this episode. But um, before I get started, I just wanted to remind everybody that if you like this show, go ahead and hit that like button, hit that subscribe button, spread the word, tell your friends. Also, if you have a comment or question, or if you'd like me to talk about certain movies or franchises, you can leave a comment or in the comment section, or you can email me anytime at the address listed in the description of this video. So with that out of the way, let's get started with this. This is interesting. Okay. So there um one of, I wouldn't say my favorite series of movies because I haven't seen the third one. But I really enjoy the live action Venom movies with Tom Hardy. I haven't seen Venom: The Last Dance. Um, I've heard it's not very good, but I enjoy them. Now, do do those Venom movies, as my father would say, do those movies have high artistic merit? No, they are pure action schlocky entertainment, and I love him. I love them for that reason. And by the way, Tom Hardy is so good in that role. Um, Now, what's interesting about those Venom movies is that they um, they deviated from the comics a little bit because Venom is famously a Spider-Man villain, um, and I was perfectly fine with Spider-Man not being included in those Venom movies. I'm like, sure, as long as you can tell a good story, am I is it a little odd? Sure, but I'll get over it. I will say I do, yeah, yeah, but and they also deviated from the comics in terms of um those Venom movies have more of a kind of um, buddy cop kind of comedy to them, um, which I find quite entertaining, actually. But that was also a deviation from the comics. Those are more the in the comics. Venom is uh, more darker, more darker, is more dark and more menacing. Um, I actually, I am a big fan of the how Venom was portrayed in the Spider-Man animated series in the 90s. The Venom is portrayed as a in that animated series as a more menacing version of Spider-Man, Um, and you know, I understand because it was a '90s children's cartoon. There's only so much they could do with the excessive violence that is typical of the Venom character. Like if you read Venom in the comics, it's pretty intense. It's very violent. Um, but the there's a three-part um, storyline in the Spider-Man animated series called Alien Costume, and it's awesome. It's awesome. Um, and that the way Venom is portrayed and written in the Spider-Man animated series, I would say, is more comic accurate than the character is in the Tom Hardy Venom movies. I still enjoyed the way the character is written in the movies, but the way I prefer the character from the Spider-Man animated series in the 90s. Now, Venom: The Last Dance, which is the third one in that trilogy, is I haven't seen it, but it's the end. It's the conclusion of that trilogy. However, there is going to be more Venom in the future. This article is on The Hollywood Reporter, published by Boris Kitt. Um, this article says the studio behind Sony's Venom franchise. So Sony is sorry, I'm struggling a little bit. So Sony, who is the studio behind the Tom Hardy Venom movies, there it says here that the studio behind the Marvel anti-hero movies is developing its first animated movie based on the character. And it has tapped Zach Lipovsky and Adam B. Stein, the duo behind last year's surprise horror hit Final Destination Bloodlines, to direct the project. Now, here's the interesting thing. This article does go on to say that Tom Hardy, who starred in the studio's recent trio of live-action movies as Eddie Brock, the human who bonds with the Black Oozy alien symbiote, and provided the voice for Venom, is involved in the animated project as a producer as well, as is Kelly Marcel, his go-to screenwriter for the live-action movies. That's interesting. Now, I will say, okay, first of all, Final Destination Bloodlines. Look, I will say, the Final Destination movies are, for the most part, just cheesy, just a cheesy good time watching horror movies. You know, for the most part, those movies, you watch those movies to see the creative ways people die. You know, Final Destination Bloodlines is legitimately great. It is a great horror movie. I was quite surprised. I was like, this is not as uh, cheesy and over and this is not as cheesy as the previous installments. Like Final Destination Bloodlines is seriously awesome. So you get those guys directing a Venom animated movie. Awesome. Now I will say, Kelly Marcel, I think it's implied in this article that okay, so Kelly Marcel, the go-to screenwriter for the live action movies, is involved. but no writer is attached to this animated movie. Okay, so that's interesting. So Kelly Marcel, I don't know if she'll be writing this movie. I hope not. And I say this respectfully. There are things, and this may sound like a weird comparison, but maybe it's not. There are things that you can get away with in animation that you can't get away with in live action. I think, and again, this may be a bad comparison, but a lot of things, like if you watch some episodes of Family Guy, like there's an episode of Family Guy where Lois learns taekwondo or karate or something, and to defend herself, and she ends up making the entire household a very violent family. And there's a sequence in that episode where the entire family is just violently attacking each other, right? And that's something that could only really work in animation. You could never get away with that in live action, right? Like, people would be up in arms if that happened in live action. Considering the very dark, I would love if this Venom animated movie leaned more into the dark, very violent nature of the character of Venom. I don't want a repeat of the Tom Hardy, of what they did with the character in the Tom Hardy movies. Not because I didn't like it, but because we've already seen it. Like, I want a live action version of, I would love to see, not a live action version, but I want to see an animated movie of the kind of Venom, like obviously a more violent version, but an animated, more violent version of the Venom that we got in the Spider-Man animated series, because that creeped me the hell out. Like, that was awesome. And I think Venom fans, we all want that. There's a very dark, violent nature to the character. I think you could really lean into the nature of the Venom character in animation. You know, biting people's heads off and stuff like that. You could really lean into that in animation as opposed to doing it in live action. I am very excited about this. I love the character of Venom. A lot of people do. And it would be nice to see. It would be great to see. It would be great to see a truly faithful adaptation of a truly faithful interpretation of the character. Who is? Oh. Hold on. Yeah, I would love to see a truly faithful interpretation of the character. Do I think that the portrayal of Venom in the Tom Hardy movies was better than the one in the Tobey Maguire movie? Absolutely. Absolutely. But I think an animated Venom movie, you could really lean into the true nature of the character. And I think Venom fans all want that. I want that. So, yeah, jump in the comment section and let me know what you guys think about this. Hold on just a second. Okay. Let's see. Moving on here. So, one of my favorite actors, and I think um, one of the greatest actors of all time, is Tom Hanks. He can do anything, um, as far as I'm concerned. Now, what's interesting about Tom Hanks, and this is an interesting bit of trivia, is that Tom Hanks is related to, and by related I mean extremely distantly related to Abraham Lincoln. Um, there's a like I'm like which is kind of cool, you know. Now the reason I bring that interesting bit of trivia up is that Tom Hanks, there's a movie that he's going to be in, and he is going to play Abraham Lincoln. This article is on Deadline, published by Anthony D'Alessandro. This article says Tom Hanks. Let me. Okay. Um, a little ways down here in this article, it says the two-time Oscar winner is set to play Abraham Lincoln, the 16th president of the United States, in Starburns Industries' live-action stop-motion animation hybrid movie Lincoln in the Bardo, based on George Saunders' New York Times bestseller and 2017 Booker Prize winner. In the movie, Hanks will portray a live-action version of Lincoln, who made his mark in history by abolishing slavery and leading the U.S. through the Civil War. Production will take place in London. Let's see. This article does go on to say, Lincoln in the Bardo will employ a unique blend of stop-motion animation and live action to explore one of the most intimate moments of Lincoln's life, centering on his relationship with his recently deceased 11-year-old son. The movie will explore themes of love, empathy, and human capacity in the face of grief as the story unfolds through an ensemble of characters, both living and dead, historical and invented. This is interesting. Okay. Now, there have been, first of all, let me just say this. I love stop motion animation. I think animation I think animation is for everybody. I mean, there are people who say, "Oh, animation is for kids." Like, fuck off. Animation's awesome, and it is a very important medium. And it can be really, really interesting to watch different kinds of animation. And I love animation, and I really love stop motion animation. I mean, and the craft and the excuse me, the amount of hard work that goes into creating stop motion animation is really, really groundbreaking. And I love stop motion animation. Now, it's cool that Tom Hanks is going to play Abraham Lincoln because he's related to Abraham Lincoln. There have been, so this idea of Abraham Lincoln centering on his relationship with his recently deceased 11-year-old son. That's interesting. That means it could be a little dark, a little intense. not not necessarily intense, but a little dark, which I think is really interesting. You know, having a relationship with your recently deceased child. I think that's an interesting way to go. Um, I will say, and I could be wrong, um, but I think look, there have been a couple uh, very famous portrayals of Abraham Lincoln. I mean, I think Henry Fonda played Abraham Lincoln in Young. There's a movie called Young Mr. Lincoln. Um, Let me see here, which came out in 1939. Um, that was directed by John Ford, and it starred Henry Fonda, and that's one of the more one of the most famous portrayals of Abraham Lincoln. Obviously, the other most famous portrayal is Daniel Day Lewis, who was uh, perfect. He was perfect. And I could be wrong about this, and hopefully I am, but I think I'm afraid of film audiences comparing Tom Hanks Tom Hanks's performance as Abraham Lincoln to other portrayals of Abraham Lincoln. I think the key is what can Tom Hanks bring to the role that has been that will be different from previous portrayals of the character. Um, I would hate for film audiences to be like, yeah, well, Daniel Day Lewis was better, you know, like who cares? Honestly, um, I just it's Tom Hanks, so it's going to be a great performance, um, and again, this sounds very interesting and a little dark, and I love the idea that it's going to be a live action stop motion animation hybrid movie. Again, it's cool that Tom Hanks is playing Abraham Lincoln, considering he's extremely distantly related to the guy. Um, so that's cool. Um, so yeah, I think this sounds really interesting. So, I mean, what do you guys think? Do you guys think I'm wrong in comparing portrayals of Abraham Lincoln? Uh, maybe I am. I don't know. I hope I'm wrong. But this does sound interesting. So jump in the comment section and let me know what you guys think about this. Okay, so this next bit of news involves one of my favorite actors. So I'm a big fan of J.K. Simmons. He is an actor who he played J. Jonah Jameson in the Tobey Maguire Spider-Man movies. He won his Oscar for Whiplash. He's a fantastic actor. He's one of my favorite actors. And there's a new dramedy movie that is coming that he is going to be in. This article is on The Hollywood Reporter, published by Etan Vlessing. Excuse me. Let me drink some water here. Okay. This article says J.K. Simmons, the Bear actor Abby Elliott, and John Reynolds are top-lining Purgatory, Lindsay Lanzillota's coming-of-age comedy drama and feature directorial debut. And this article does go on to say, a synopsis from the producers reads, set in the early 1980s, the film follows 13-year-old Beatrice Gravel, played by Ruby McGurran, whose comfortable world, family, school, and church fractures when her mother, played by Abby Elliott, moves out to self-actualize, leaving Beatrice and her sister, played by Lauren McRae, with their devastated father, played by John Reynolds. As Beatrice doubles down on a plan to fix her family, she barrels through bullies, friendship blow-ups, a makeout party, and a kleptomaniac babysitter, forcing her to decide who she wants to be when she can't get what she wants. This sounds really interesting. You know, self-actualizing yourself. Um, you know, I think there's a lot to be said about telling a story where you have a character that wants to find the best version of themselves and find out and truly find themselves and discover themselves and truly embrace who they really are. I think there's a lot to be said in telling a story about a character that wants to do that. And it sounds like this is going to tell that story, and there are going to be consequences. And I think there's a lot to be said about that. Like, you can't just... I think that's something that not a lot of people talk about is, you know, yeah, I want to find myself and discover my true potential and discover who I really am. But there's going to be costs to that. And I think that's an important aspect of that is, like, not a lot of people talk about the costs and the consequences of someone who wants to discover who they truly are. And I think that's important. I think that's going to be really, really interesting. J.K. Simmons is going to play Beatrice's confidant. So that's going to be interesting. I feel like that's going to be just a naturalistic character for him to play. That kind of reminds me of the Woody Harrelson character in The Edge of 17. It kind of reminds me of that, and I think that's a very kind of natural character for J.K. Simmons to play, and I have no doubt that he's going to be great. I'm not familiar with Abby Elliott or John Reynolds. The title Purgatory is an apt title, I will say. So Lindsay Lanzillotta, this is going to be her feature directorial debut. And I've said before, and in fact I talked about it last episode, I think directorial debuts are I'm dubious. I'm always dubious about them, because if your directorial debut doesn't go well, it can be pretty hard to recover from. Now that being said, and on the other hand, if it does go well, you're off to the races. Now that being said, getting an Oscar winner like J.K. Simmons involved in this project, that makes me have faith that Lindsay Lanzillotta, as a first-time director, is prepared and she's organized. Lindsay so um, so there is that. This sounds very interesting, and it sounds like it could really be a good story, a good movie. I just hope it goes well. Um, um, so yeah, so uh, jump in the comment section and let me know what you guys think about this Purgatory, a movie about self actualization. What do you guys think about that? Jump in the comment section and let me know your thoughts. Okay, let's see here. Okay, so it's been a minute since I've talked about this whole. I've made some notes here. It's been a minute since um, I have talked about this whole Netflix, Paramount, Warner Brothers deal. So I wanted to catch you up on everything that's happened. And there are a few things that I wanted to talk about. So there was an article published on February 24th that says, and this article was published by George Saunders and Alex Weprin. That and this article says that basically hints that, or basically says that Paramount Skydance sweetened the bid for Warner Brothers Discovery, and they as of February 24th, Paramount Skydance sweetened their bid for Warner Brothers Discovery, and Warner Brothers Discovery said that it is officially reviewing that bid. Now, the details of this revised bid are not known. I have heard, and again, I could be wrong about this, but I have heard that Paramount Skydance increased their bid from $30 a share to $32 a share. And again, this is all as of February 24th. Now, as of that date, Warner Brothers Discovery was still recommending that their shareholders vote for the Netflix deal. So there's that bit of news. Now, not 2 days later, not even 2 days later, on the Hollywood Reporter, there's an article on the Hollywood Reporter published by Alex Weprin. This report says, in a stunning twist, Netflix is declining to raise its bid for Warner Brothers, positioning David Ellison's Paramount as the winner in the battle for the fabled studio. Netflix co-CEOs Ted Sarandos and Greg Peters released a statement Thursday outlining their decision, namely that the deal is, quote, no longer financially attractive, unquote, and that it was always a nice-to-have at the right price, not a must-have at any price. That is a quote. Was always a nice-to-have at the right price, not a must-have at any price. The transaction we negotiated would have created shareholder value with a clear path to regulatory approval. However, we've always been disciplined and at the right price required to match Paramount Skydance's latest offer. The deal is no longer financially attractive. So we are declining to match the Paramount Skydance bid, the co-CEOs said. Okay. So, and this was and this article does go on to say that with Netflix out, Paramount's latest bid is almost a sure thing to be accepted by the Warner's board, which determined earlier Thursday that it was a superior proposal to Netflix's deal. So, as of February 26th, that's the information. And as of February 26th, I can tell you how I felt about it. And actually, how I still feel about it. I think this is devastating for the entertainment industry. I really do. I think Paramount wants to own Warner Brothers Discovery just to own it, and they don't really have plans. I mean, Paramount can't even run Paramount. David Ellison can't even run Paramount properly. If you look at their film slate, their upcoming film slate, there's no evidence that David Ellison can run Paramount properly. Paramount is also in massive financial debt, and owning Warner Brothers Discovery will not help with that situation. Also, it has been reported that Paramount plans to shut down HBO Max and merge it with Paramount Plus so that it's one streaming service. That sucks. It's also been reported that there's going to be $6 billion in cuts. People are going to lose their jobs. Lots of people are going to lose their jobs. As far as I know, that wasn't going to be the case if Netflix owned Warner Brothers Discovery. I could be wrong about that, so don't quote me on it. But as far as I know, there were not going to be massive layoffs if Netflix gained ownership of Warner Brothers Discovery. I find this very devastating. I think this creates a monopoly. And like I said before, I don't think David Ellison has a plan. He conducts great town hall meetings about how much he loves the movies. But what's your plan going forward? Because your upcoming film slate sucks. There's no evidence that you can run Paramount in a coherent way. And on a personal note, it's sad to see. It's always, and I understand the industry is changing. It's changing a lot. It's sad to see remnants of old Hollywood slip away. It really is. I find this to be truly devastating news. You know, we just want to own Warner Brothers Discovery. Why? Just to own it. We just want it. Okay. You know, why? There's no, and there's also, and I'm not going to get into it, but because it's a little complicated even for me to understand. There's also political machinations behind this going on, so there's that too. Now, with all that said, let me hold on. Oh dear. Oh dear. There's something. Oh, there was something else that I wanted to. I'm having. Oh, I wanted to find it for you. Here we go. There is this piece on worldofreal.com that David Zaslav, who is Warner Brothers Discovery CEO, hints that this deal might not close. So about halfway down in this article here, David Zaslav emphasized that David Zaslav held this town hall meeting, talking to the staff of Warner Brothers Discovery. And David Zaslav emphasized that the Paramount Warner Brothers Discovery deal still requires significant regulatory approval and could take 6 to 18 months to close, if it closes at all. He said, the deal may not close if it doesn't close, we get $7 billion and we get back to work. This piece also says that Warner Brothers Discovery's board warned shareholders that accepting Paramount's offer might trigger a wave of employee departures, citing the $6 billion in cost reductions that Ellison's company aimed to achieve. So, David Zaslav, the CEO of Warner Brothers Discovery, is just like, you know what? This, like, don't get your hope. Don't put the cart before the horse. Like, this might not happen. And he doesn't seem too worried about it either. He just seems to casually throw it out here, like, just so you know, this might not happen. Which he just kind of has this, let's see what happens kind of attitude about it, which I think is interesting. I think it's very interesting. Because it requires regulatory approval, and I think I don't think anybody, and I could be wrong about this, but I don't think anybody at Warner Brothers Discovery wants this to happen with Paramount. And I do think that people will leave. I have no evidence to support this, but I do think people will leave if this happens with Paramount, if this deal happens. But David Zaslav kind of being like, you know what, this might not happen, so, don't get too excited here. Which I find very interesting. It's kind of like he's just casually laid back about it, which is a very, like, okay, all right. So I just wanted to talk about this for a minute. If in an ideal world, I would want Warner Brothers to just stay Warner Brothers and not have it be sold at all. But I understand why it's up for sale. I just don't like the idea of Paramount owning it. I didn't always feel that way, but I do now. But particularly David Zaslav being like, you know what, this isn't for sure. Let's just see what happens. That's, I think, very telling of how David Zaslav feels about this. I don't know. I don't know if it'll close. I just don't know. If it does, I think a lot of people will leave. Which sucks. It's going to really, really suck. So I just wanted to talk about that for a minute. I haven't talked about it in a while. So yeah. So if you have any thoughts about this, or want to comment about it, just drop a comment or ask me a question, and I will. I don't claim to be an expert on this kind of thing. I just go with the information that I find and give you my thoughts. So if you have a comment or question about it or want to talk about it, feel free, and I will try to answer as best I can. So yeah. Moving on here. This next bit of news is rather intriguing and rather like eyebrow raising, thought provoking, whatever phrase you want to use. I think one of the, I want to make sure I get the name right about this. So one of the, I think, worst film franchises in maybe the worst franchise in the history of film is the Sony Spider-Man Universe. Now, when I say that, I'm talking about Venom, Venom 2, Morbius, Madam Web, Venom 3, Kraven the Hunter, a couple of those I haven't even seen. There's no doubt in my mind that and you know what? Aside from the Venom films, financially speaking, aside from the Venom films, it's just been a string of financial disappointments. Again, you have Venom, Venom Let There Be Carnage, Morbius, Madam Web, Venom The Last Dance, and Kraven the Hunter. Just financial bomb after financial bomb after financial bomb. Probably the worst franchise in the history of film. Now, a lot of times, many times when you have a failed film franchise, what often happens is you have the creators of that film franchise, or the owners of the film franchise, or whatever word you want to use, say, you know what, we're going to wait a few years and then try again. And that is what's happening with this Sony Spider-Man Universe. This article is on The Hollywood Reporter, published by James Hibbard. A little ways down here in this article, it says that Sony Pictures chairman and CEO Tom Rothman confirms the studio, that Sony, is planning a fresh reboot. I hate the word reboot. I prefer reinvention. Fresh reboot to the Spider-Man universe after the franchise's string of box office disappointments, aside from the trio of Venom films, which performed well. Tom Rothman was asked by Matt Belloni on the Town podcast, where are we in the Spider-Man franchise? Not the animated Spider-Verse. Is the larger Spider-Verse dead? No, replied Rothman. He was then asked, are you going to go back to those at some point? Yes, Rothman confirmed. And then he was asked, but it'll be a fresh reboot? Tom Rothman said yes. And he was asked, new people? And Rothman said yes. Yes. So, now I should point out that there's this upcoming TV series called Spider Noir that looks interesting and stars Nicolas Cage. It looks interesting, and I hope it's good. But that is the only TV series in this Sony Spider-Verse. Sony Spider-Man Universe. And I think this is a good idea. You know what? They did the same thing with Superman. They did the same thing with Batman. You know, after the financial disasters of Spider-Man 3 and 4, you know, after the utter toilet bug that was Batman and Robin, what did Warner Brothers do? They waited 5 or 6 years and then tried again. You know? And you know, what did Warner Brothers do after the failure of the Snyderverse? They waited a couple years and then hired James Gunn to do Superman, you know, which was great. So I think this is a good idea. And now, let me see here. Yeah. So they're going to reinvent the franchise with new people. And I think that's great. And like I said, there are a couple movies in here that I haven't even seen. I haven't seen Madam Web. I haven't seen Kraven the Hunter. But I think, you know, especially, you know, it's pretty clear that, judging from the critical and financial response to this franchise, that nobody was interested in this. Because they weren't necessarily not interested in seeing movies. They wanted to see movies with these characters, but they wanted to see good movies with these characters, and that isn't what happened. If you're going to do a Kraven the Hunter movie, if you're going to do a Madam Web movie, make it good, and then people will see it. And I think this is a good idea. I would say wait, maybe 5 to 7 years, and then try again. That's what I would do. And you know, I would say my suggestion, and look, I am a nobody, and so my advice probably means nothing. But I would say don't put the cart before the horse. My suggestion would be tell one good story, do one good movie, and go from there. And don't concentrate on connecting it all. Focus on that after you've had a couple of hits. And get good writers. For God's sake, get good writers, get good directors, and go back and focus on the lore of these characters. Um, and just tell good stories. That's my suggestion. Um, so yeah, I think this is a good idea. You've had financial disaster after one financial disaster after another. I think this is a great idea. Wait 5 to 7 years and then try again. Cool, awesome. I hope it goes well. I think Tom Rothman, in making this decision, is smart. This is a smart decision, and it's a good decision. So jump in the comment section and let me know what you guys think about the Sony Spider-Man Universe being reinvented. So this next bit of news is really cool. So hold on a second. Okay, so you guys know, and I've talked about this before, but I love my Marvel and DC stuff, but I also love the more independent comics and their film and TV, more film, but their film and TV adaptations. I love seeing the more independent stuff get recognized. And there is one coming that is getting a film adaptation. This article is on Screen Rant, published by Nick Bethro. This article says, a best-selling sci-fi graphic novel series has scored a movie adaptation. According to Deadline, the graphic novel series Hilo, is it Hilo or Hilo? Hilo will be getting a 3D animated film adaptation from production studios Media One Kids and Family through its subsidiary Submarine and Sinking Ship Entertainment. The graphic novel series began in 2015, following the adventures of a young boy who crash lands onto Earth from outer space. The comedic action-adventure series, created by Judd Winnick, is primarily aimed at children, becoming a bestseller in the 11 years it's been in circulation. The graphic novel has sold over 1 million copies as of writing and has earned numerous positive reviews in the process. Let's see. This article does point out, although it's unclear what aspects of Hilo will be pulled into the adaptation, it makes the most sense for the movie to adapt from the first graphic novel, The Boy Who Crashed to Earth, which sees the titular superpowered Hilo arrive on the planet, befriending kids DJ and Gina in the process. But something else has crash-landed alongside him. The upcoming sci-fi movie promises a premise that will be fun for families while hinging on the lore of the graphic novel that made it such a bestseller. Depending on how the movie is approached, it could become just as successful as the likes of Captain Underpants, the first epic movie, or Dogman, becoming a film franchise of its own. This is awesome. This is awesome. Yeah, I love, I love science fiction, and I love that, the more independent stuff is getting I love that this kind of more independent graphic novel is getting a film adaptation. I also, going back to animation, I love that this is getting 3D animation. This is awesome. And you could really do a lot of cool stuff with it. You know what's interesting? There was the this reminds me, speaking of like animation movies that are fun for families. My wife Katie and I a few years back, we went to go see we went to go see that DC Super Pets movie. It's, you know what? What year did that come out? It was called DC League of Super Pets. It came out in 2022. That movie's pretty good. Like, I was kind of surprised at how much. I mean, it's pretty damn good. It's very entertaining. I will say I liked it a lot better. I like DC League of Super Pets more than I did the Flash movie. I don't know what that says about me, but and again, animation is for everybody. I love animation and 3D animation. This sounds awesome. And I love that the more independent stuff is getting film adaptation, and they're capitalizing this. Film studio is capitalizing on the success of a graphic novel series. Audiences want to see this stuff. There's an audience for this, and I think it's great that studios are realizing that people want to see this, and this sounds awesome. Um, yeah. So, Hilo getting a 3D film adaptation. Jump in the comment section and let me know what you guys think about this. Okay. So, this next bit of news is really interesting and piques my interest. So, one of my favorite movies of the last few years was Spotlight, which was directed by Tom McCarthy, a man by the name of Tom McCarthy. Spotlight it stars Michael Keaton, Rachel McAdams. It came out in 2015, and it's great. And it's this biopic about the Boston Globe's Spotlight investigative journalism team that uncovers that uncovered the cover-up of child sexual abuse by Catholic priests in the Boston Archdiocese, and it's great, and I think it won Best Picture, so that means that Michael Keaton was in two movies that won Best Picture in a row, two movies in a row that won Best Picture, I should say. Michael Keaton, Mark Ruffalo, Rachel McAdams, Stanley Tucci's in it. It's great. If you guys haven't seen Spotlight, watch it. It's fantastic. So, this will be, so Tom McCarthy will be doing a new movie, and it will be his first movie that he'll be directing, that he's directed in 5 years. So, and it's okay. So this article is on Joe Blow, published by Kevin Fraser. Deadline reports that Paul Rudd, Evan Peters, Amy Ryan, Paul Giamatti, John Turturro, Tatiana Maslany, and Jason Clarke have joined the cast of it's as of now untitled movie directed by Tom McCarthy, but it's being described as a darkly comic drama. This article does go on to say that it will be based on Nathaniel Rich's Losing Earth, a recent history. The true story is set at a beachside resort in Florida in 1980, when 20 experts gather for a weekend conference on a global issue that is starting to gain traction: the effects of CO2 emissions on the climate. The group of scientists, activists, and policymakers have one simple mandate from Congress: write a statement about what to do. Easier said than done. This sounds great. This sounds similar to Spotlight in that this sounds similar to Spotlight in that this movie is going to be about something that people know is important. That people know is important to talk about, and yet nobody's talking about it. You know, it sounds like that it's going to be that kind of a movie, or that, you know, I guess that's like, it's one of those, like, nobody else is talking about it. Why aren't we talking about it? Let's talk about it. So this cast, and I love that Tom McCarthy is going to be directing this. This cast, you know, I'm not too big a fan of Jason Clarke. He was from Zero Dark 30. He was in one of the Terminator movies. I find him to be very stoic and very kind of, he doesn't emote a lot, which I find kind of irritating. But I'm sure under the direction of Tom McCarthy that will change. So let me just go down this. Tatiana Maslany, you know, I never watched Orphan Black, but, and I know this sounds weird, I did watch the She-Hulk Attorney at Law that she was in. And I know that that movie, I'm sorry, I know that series got a lot of hate for whatever reason. I loved it. I loved She-Hulk Attorney at Law. That show's great. I don't know what anybody else is smoking, but that show's great, and she was great in it. She was funny and sexy and, you know, serious, and she just displayed this wide range of emotion, and she was so great in that show. John Turturro. I love watching John Turturro. Let me see here. I'm looking at his John Turturro. He was in a Coen Brothers movie called Barton Fink, which is great. It's great. You know, obviously, you know, he's on that TV series Severance. He was in Quiz Show. Let's see. You know, he was great in the Batman, the Robert Pattinson Batman movie. He was even great in that. Obviously, The Big Lebowski. You know what, though? And I know this sounds weird. Even in the Transformers movies, he's very entertaining to watch. And I know that sounds weird to say, but I don't care. He was in the remake of Taking of Pelham 123. Um, he's very entertaining to watch, and I love John Turturro. He was in Secret Window with Johnny Depp. Um, he was in. That's the one I was thinking of. He was in Mr. Deeds with Adam Sandler. And he's so funny in that movie. He just pops up out of nowhere, and just goes. He's just like he adores the Hawaiian Punch. Just he's so funny. He's very I find him very entertaining. Let's see. Paul Giam I adore Paul Giamatti. The first movie I saw him in was a movie called Duets that he was in with Huey Lewis and Gwyneth Paltrow. I'm just going out for a pack of cigarettes. I that's the first time I saw him. And now he's got a couple Oscar nominations. A lot of people think he should have won the Oscar for Cinderella Man, for supporting actor. He's great in that. I love Paul Giamatti. Even in not so good movies like Lady in the Water, he's fantastic. Evan Peters. I've seen a few things that he's been in. I want to make sure, because I get him confused with somebody. Yeah. Okay. So, Evan Peters, he played Quicksilver in the Fox X-Men movies. He did not play Quicksilver in the Marvel MCU, like Age of Ultron. He played Quicksilver in X-Men Days of Future Past and X-Men Apocalypse, and he was great. He's great in those movies. He was in Kick-Ass. I really like him. I love Paul Rudd in anything and everything. Paul Rudd is great. I loved him. I love him as Ant-Man. I remember seeing him guest star on Friends back in the day. I love Paul Rudd. But yeah. So, but yeah, this premise sounds interesting. Again, it sounds like something similar to Spotlight, in that this is an important issue that people should be that people should be talking about, and yet we're not talking about it. And why aren't we? The globe, that the effects of CO2 emissions on the climate. That's important. That's an important thing to talk about. This sounds great to me. So jump on the comment section and let me know your thoughts on this. All right, so a couple more things to talk about this week. So on this episode. So one of my favorite actresses is Emma Stone. I love Emma Stone. I first saw her in the Spider-Man movies that she was in, the Amazing Spider-Man movies. I love her so much, and she has 2 Oscars now, and she just got her. She was nominated again. She didn't win, but she was nominated again for Begonia on Sunday. But I love her, and she's a workhorse, man. God, and she was so good in Birdman. Just that scene where she's just telling, Michael Keaton plays her father, and there's a scene where she just lays into him. And she's great. Now, she is going to be. What's the Poor Things, which was directed by Yorgos Lanthimos. She was great in that. So she's all set for her next movie. This article is on Screen Rant, published by Abigail Stevens. And a little ways down here it says, per Deadline, Emma Stone will lead Dave McCary's upcoming rom-com, The Catch, while Chris Pine is in talks to co-star. So that's not for sure. So yeah. Let me see here. I wonder if it gives any information on The Catch. It does not. But it's going to be a romantic comedy. Now, fun fact, Dave McCary is also Emma Stone's husband. For anybody that cares. So, I've always maintained that a good romantic comedy can be a lot of fun to watch. And it'll be great to see Emma Stone in a movie like this. She's on fire right now, and as she should be. So there's not much information to go on here. But yeah, so jump in the comments section and let me know what you guys think about Emma Stone being in a romantic comedy called The Catch with potentially Chris Pine. All right, so I'm going to take a little break and come back here in a few minutes. There's something I got to go do. I'll be back on here in a few minutes. So I hope you guys enjoy the rest of what I have to say. And I will be back shortly. So stay tuned.